Hello everybody, my name is Jeremy and welcome back to the Kanto region here in beautiful Pallet Town that is really starting to come together. Welcome to the show, folks. It's another week. We are making some serious progress here, and in this episode, we more or less fill and finish up the kind of like inner Pallet Town area, which is, I think, pretty exciting. Between this episode and the next episode, we more or less finish this town and start to make our way towards Viridian City. I think I might come back and do a little bit more of the outlying area. I think I might come back and do like some little kind of like outlying fishing villages and little, farm villages kind of around these little mountains that are on either side of it. But for the time being, I want to prioritize making my way towards Viridian City. Just because, that's kind of the spirit of this project is, getting things done, getting things moving, and moving on from them before we get too bogged down in little side projects, right? And my thinking on this is that if you watched the Pokemon anime series, there are a lot of like little towns and villages and things that they kind of end up in throughout their journeys that they don't appear in the game, but they are, I guess, canon for the show. I'm thinking of one in particular that I came across on a map that I had found. I'll put that on screen right now. There's actually a lot of these kind of like fan-generated maps of the Kanto region, although oddly enough, not that many of them. I had kind of expected there to be more stuff out there for me to work with in terms of like fan-generated interpretations of what some of these places look like, and I'm actually kind of surprised to find that there's not a ton of it. There are some good ones, and there's definitely some that I'm working with, but I guess considering how many times, on Reddit or something like that, I would come across, 3D renderings of like, what if Pokemon existed in the real world? What would their fur look like? What would their skin look like? These seemed like the kinds of things that people were fans of the franchise were thinking about and talking about and trying to come up with answers for. I'm just a little surprised that there aren't like some cool detailed maps. I guess this is kind of a pretty singular idea that I have here, and so I guess that's kind of reassuring in terms of my own creativity. I kind of had assumed that I was going to be on well-trodden territory here, but well, here we are with a pretty unique idea for a project. Anyway, we are working on this sort of main drag of Pallet Town. In the beginning of this project, we had put a couple little things down here, but not too much. But it's like the biggest road in town. It is still only 2 lanes, but it is the biggest road in town. It leads from the highway into the main downtown area, the fishing port, and what have you. I'm just adding some retail stuff around here. Again, trying to, like in other projects, trying to play with height differences, trying to do some stuff to kind of like break up the monotony of just like putting a building next to a road and just kind of, calling it done. Pallet Town in particular is going to be a lot more detailed than that because it's a small place, and in small places I feel like you kind of have to do something. I guess what I mean to say is that you gotta pick something, right? If you're doing a big place, I feel like you can get by with kind of just placing stuff and moving and placing and moving and placing and moving, because by the end you'll zoom out and the big picture of a big city will be impressive and cool. Whereas when you're doing something small like Pallet Town, these sort of like small fishing villages, these small farming villages, I feel like there's not as much to look at and there's not as much to distract yourself with. So you got to get a little harder with the details. You got to get a little more creative with the way that you're engaging stuff with the terrain. Over here, I'm detailing this little grocery store. I guess it's kind of a couple different stores in the same building. You can see it happening on the right side of the screen right now, actually. One of the downsides of these cool Ronix rural roads that I talked about in a previous episode, one of the bad things about them is that people walk kind of on the side of them. which is fine when they're on their own. It's fine when they're on ground level. However, when you use them like I'm using them as a as a sloped road that a wall kind of cuts directly into, they look incredible, but people just kind of walk in thin air. So that's kind of a bummer. I don't know if there is a mod or a capability within a mod that enables you to keep people from walking on certain roads. I know there's plenty of ways to keep people from driving on them, but I've never actually come across a mod that keeps people from walking on particular roads, and that would be pretty nice. Over here, this road it's a specific Japanese one, and people walk, in the middle of the road there. So that's a little bit better. And then otherwise, I'm just kind of like fencing off some of these areas just to keep people from, hurting themselves near the edges of these roads, because some of these drops are pretty significant. I mean, this wall behind the grocery store looks like it's probably, 30 feet high, 25, something like that. Quite a tall wall that if somebody in their backyard up here were to jump or fall off of, would be likely fatal, if not life-changingly injurious. Anyway, otherwise just kind of trying to, play with different configurations of road and path, and in some cases just kind of making these sort of like unofficial cul-de-sacs, I guess you would call them. Was kind of what you saw up there with that little residential area. But now we've moved on to a different little project. This is kind of like right in front of the big school that we had made in a previous episode. I had said, it's a mix of a high school and a middle school and maybe even an elementary school. Some people had taken issue with that, but it definitely happens. I didn't make up the idea of combining schools. There definitely are places where, the age groups are quite mixed. Maybe not elementary all the way up to high school, but it definitely happens, at least elementary and middle school, or middle school and high school. You'll see that around. So we're let's not get ahead of ourselves. It can be realistic. It may not be, but it's certainly possible. Anyway, I'm putting this little restaurant in this little bend of the road. I thought it was like kind of a neat little spot to put a little something, and I thought it would make sense just as a just from a business perspective, that somebody would set up shop kind of like right here, right in front of the school. This is probably like a pretty popular spot for kids to grab a bite to eat before they head into school, or maybe kind of like gather around and loiter after school. Probably a place where a lot of, troublesome goings-on happen. Probably a pretty good setting for a slice of life anime, if you were to imagine such a thing. And anyways, we have this big hill here that it's probably not too steep to build anything on, and maybe someday in the future would have something built on it, but I just kind of, I need to force myself a little bit to cut back on the density of this area. So I'm just kind of taking these opportunities where we have something like this to just be like, whatever, it's a hill, it's got some trees on it, and that's that. Now we're moving on to another project. We're kind of a little bit away from the main road now, next to the elementary school that we built in the last episode. And, I wanted to kind of get a little bit more religious life into Pallet Town. We already have a Shinto shrine. I wanted to have a Buddhist temple as well. However, there aren't a lot of modest Buddhist temples on the workshop. This one is probably the most modest, and you can see me here. It's a little hard to see with the lighting, but basically I found a guy walking nearby, and I paused the game and used Procedural Objects mod to kind of scale this building around him to make it look like the door is his size. And then I kind of removed a floor from the building, and that's going to be it. It's still way too big. And when we're done with this project, kind of the way that this engages with the hill is maybe, I don't know, it makes it seem a little bit too grand in my perspective for kind of what the actual idea of it was. But, we only have what we have, and I don't know, we'll try to improve it in future projects, but for the time being, that's what we got. And Now around this temple, what I'm trying to work on is a graveyard and or a cemetery. I don't know what the proper terminology for it is. Are those interchangeable? I think they might be. Anyway, I'm trying to build a cemetery. There's a pretty unique way that Japanese cemeteries look due to the fact that corpses are not buried whole. They're not buried in one piece. They are cremated generally, it seems like, and then their ashes are kind of like, I think, placed into these little stone things. Japanese people, let me know if I'm talking completely out of pocket here. I tried to read a little bit about it and learn a little bit before I worked on this project, and that seems to be the way of things. So you're able to get these headstones quite a bit denser than you would in other cultures' burial grounds. And so I just tried to kind of reflect that here. I took inspiration from a couple of places. I can't find it again, unfortunately. I was just kind of zooming around on Google Earth, just looking for inspiration for cemeteries. And I found this really neat one that was kind of like up on a hill, and it had these kind of like tiered gardens where all the headstones were. So that was mainly what I took inspiration from here. If I can manage to find it again, I'll put it on screen right now. But my guess is that there's nothing on screen right now because I don't think I'm finding it again. And otherwise, just kind of these like closed off little gardens around the temple are kind of the style I'm going for. And yeah, it's pretty interesting looking, I think. And this is one of those things that like I've been making these Cities Skylines videos for a while now, so I kind of have a sense of like what people respond to and what people react to and what makes people feel different ways. And this has always been interesting to me that I always put cemeteries in my projects. I always put graveyards. I feel like that's a pretty important, thing to add to your cities and towns. And I mean, it's important enough that it's a key function of the game, death care. It is pretty important. But I'm always intrigued by the fact that nobody ever gets upset with me for putting them into my projects and for emphasizing them the way that I will. But it's just something that I noticed when I was working on Vogelstad and then when I was working on Neptune City. Both of them have specifically gay areas, specifically LGBT, neighborhoods. They have gayborhoods, if you will. And every time I do one of those, somebody will be in the comments saying, God, it's so political, it's so annoying, I play video games to get away from this stuff. I don't want to think about anything while I'm doing my video game stuff. And I'm just always so intrigued by that, because if you were to ask me, what is the thing that I don't want to be reminded of when I'm playing video games, I would probably put death pretty high up that list. I would probably say mortality and the people I've lost over the years are things I don't really want to be thinking about. Not whether or not there are gay or trans people. That's not really high on the list for me. Anyway, that's just a little tangent. It's something I was thinking about while I was working on this project, and I thought I would share with you. So we're on the other side of this thing, and I realized kind of after I built the first part that due to the way that the hills are in Pallet Town, we're kind of left with a really, really sharp, really steep hill on the other side of this temple. So I'm kind of building these tiered little stairwell areas. And this is kind of what I was talking about before, that like the way that I end up engaging this with the hill makes it look way too grand. I think it looks more like a castle than a temple in the end, and that's kind of a problem. But I think, once I fill in the areas around it, it disappears enough that at least when you're looking at the city from afar, it doesn't stand out too much. It's definitely the highest thing in town. Like when you're looking at it, you can pretty clearly see it from anywhere. But at the very least, like it doesn't look too noticeable. Is ostentatious the word that I'm looking for? I think it is. now we're down away from the temple, away from the cemetery, working on the surrounding areas. Again, in some effort to try to, I'm going to make up a word here, de-grandify. I'm trying to take away a little bit of the grandiosity of the temple area. So I'm just putting some light industry around it, some warehouses and stuff, just to kind of just to take it down a couple of pegs, if you will. And I think I do kind of succeed. You know, I think once all this stuff is in here, it doesn't stand out quite as much. Here you see me using the parallel network tool to get some fences in here. Goodness heavens me. I know I've already talked about it once, but I'm going to talk about it again. That really changed things. It made it a lot easier to work on these areas. Back here, just a little lot for these warehouses. It's a parking lot, but then I realize too late in the process that I've detailed it in such a way that it would suggest that there are doors on the backs of these warehouses. There are not doors on the backs of these warehouses. There's a bunch of pallets and goods and crates and things that are going to be put in the back here that it just isn't going to make sense if you think about it for more than a couple of seconds. But you know, it is what it is, I guess. Yeah, see, here we go. So there's only little personal-sized doors in the back here. And that really doesn't make sense for there to be goods out there, unless they're just empty pallets from inside that some fellas kind of like haul out there for easier disposal. But even that doesn't really make sense. Here I'm using procedural objects on cars. Again, something that I have said multiple times in this project that I'm not really intending to do too much of. And yet I find myself constantly doing it. This is a cool little warehouse, by the way. I can't remember. I feel like for some reason my instinct is telling me that this warehouse actually doesn't function as a warehouse. It functions as like a shop or something, but it sure looks industrial. And part of the problem here right now is that I just moved into a new house, and I'm recording this commentary several weeks after I recorded this footage. I've been ahead episodes for a while now, as I've discussed in previous videos, and I was ahead on all this specifically because I knew I was moving, and I knew I was going to have to. I was going to have to bank a few just to like get myself through all the packing and all the work I had to do on that move. So anyway, you're hearing me kind of like catch myself up a little bit on what I've been up to in this project. And over here, just cutting off this area a little bit with some more of these tiered walls, making my way up towards that main road. Again, kind of similar to over by the school and that little restaurant. The idea here is just to kind of force myself to reduce the density here just a little bit, find ways to make this not city density, which is definitely what I'm used to in these projects. So I'm just kind of making these some tiered rice fields. It's pretty unrealistic, probably, the way that I've done this. I'm going to try to figure out better ways to do this in the future, because tiered rice fields are a pretty common thing. You definitely see them pretty often. So I got to figure out some better way to go about doing those. These brick walls just ain't it, But otherwise, just kind of filling out the area with some trees and just kind of integrating it in here. This is the last project for the episode, and it is probably my least favorite thing that I've built for Pallet Town so far. I knew I wanted to have a little bus station here. There's going to be trains throughout most of the rest of the Kanto region. There's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be high-speed rail just because of like the scaling of everything. High-speed rail just might never look any good. But I wanted for the region to have, trains, but for Pallet Town very specifically not to have trains, because the idea is that it's a small town that Ash comes from. It's disconnected from the world. He's kind of a bumpkin, he's kind of a hillbilly. He's not really so tuned into the culture of the Kanto region before he leaves his town. So the only connection that Kanto is going to have to the rest of, the only connection that Pallet Town is going to have to the rest of the Kanto region is going to be this bus that will take you all the way into Viridian City, and that's just it. That's the one connection they have, and if you want to go anywhere else, you got to take a train from Viridian City to the rest of the region. And that's kind of my thinking on, the connection points here. So I'm building a little bus station here, and I think I just I just didn't really have a good enough plan for this when I started, and that's a shame. I think it probably deserves better than what I gave it, but we're kind of at the end of this episode, and I don't know. It's kind of nothing. It's kind of just blah. Anyway, we're coming to the end of the time lapse here. We're about to jump into the cinematics, so I just want to say thank you so much for spending your Friday with me. My name is Jeremy. You can find me on Twitter at @JeremyThunder. You can check out my podcast, Generation Loss. You can become a channel member for just $5 a month. You can get access to videos before everybody else does. Right now, there should be a second episode of Kanto region. There should be the finishing of Pallet Town episode ready for you to consume. So go ahead over there and check it out. Thank you so much. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.